Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We are zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question, and that is the narcissist ever happy or are they truly unhappy? What is it about them that makes this such a difficult relationship to sustain? And really, I would have to understand or encourage others to understand that part of the trait of the narcissist is that of sort of a constant and ongoing sense of judgment and comparison and sort of pitting one against another to leverage really what becomes an imbalance or a difficult balance to sustain, really where happiness is felt and experienced. For the narcissist, I would say so much of happiness is based, or their security, maybe not even happiness, but their sense of when they're feeling good is if they are in a constant comparison to another. And that they then have a positive self-evaluation that is really sort of a self-bias. In other words, they tend to go into the entitlement or, the superiority mode. And that is constantly set up in their communications where there's always a comparison. I think that people feel when they're in relationship that they don't, how do they compare to? How, and, pass judgment from. So the narcissist relationship becomes very much pivoting or contingent based on how another will meet their judgment or assessment, meaning the constant evaluation or judgment or comparison that is communicated by the narcissist as a way to manipulate and sort of keep enmeshed in or the dynamic of sort of a constant enabling where others then will then unassailable, they're not understanding. They're really in the thick of it. They don't see the forest for the trees yet. They don't realize that they are being sort of manipulated by this judgment rather than them having an internal sense of self that is strong and resilient and not prone to over sensitivity to criticism or constant judgment and evaluation. So it creates a sort of a need within the people who they target to always feel they have a pressure, which can then also become a real obsession to meet their standards. So their standards to meet the constant comparison that they will set forth, meaning, how do you measure up to this other partner? How do you measure up to this other star? How do you measure up to this other business owner? How do you measure up to the X? How do you measure up to the Starbucks commercial? How do you measure up, to the Sports Illustrated cover? I mean, there's always a constant and comparison where they will indulge themselves in sort of, I think how they will equate themselves in, in a very positive, self-bias. Oftentimes what you might call big hat, no cattle. Have they done the work? Have they, taken the baby steps? Or are they always focusing on these big, ginormous steps that, are promulgating or appeasing to their ego, which becomes a false self for the narcissist. And this does become more pronounced with time. So there is a growth and there is an evolution, a personality growth, that the narcissist will grow. And likewise yourself, you do need to grow as well. That's, part of, the experience and your life mission, or really your purpose, what you're here for, is in that realm of to be happy, to see what you want to see, become who you want to become, and become, active, to become feeling alive, that you matter, and things that you have and experiences are on your to-do list, your bucket list. But oftentimes people will make the mistake of trying to appease the narcissist and acquiesce to that constant judging or comparison. They then, internalize that, and it might not be, based in their own self-assessment. In other words, the narcissist might, well, you've got to be a this, you've got to be a this, you've got to earn this, you have to be talented here. They have all this judgment and comparison rather than people feeling loved and appreciated just for who they are, which is really freedom and liberation. There's all these contingencies and judgments that are placed on and sort of always held up to the other, and then it's just like jump and then they say how high. So this can cause a lot of stress and a lot of unnecessary anguish and anxiety in other people. So they have to realize that they have to stop the constant measuring stick and stop constantly measuring and evaluating yourself. Stop, and if so, it's okay to just be. And you might have to grow into this awareness, grow into this experience as a lifestyle as well. Because a lot of people have reinforced and rememorized a very bad, relationship habit then. And feeling overly responsible for the happiness of another, to fulfill the judgment of another. So they become very much the givers of the world, and oftentimes they don't get their own back scratched, they don't get their chance to be heard out, they don't get their chance to feel excellent in their strengths. It's like reserved for the narcissist only, and that is just, it's not fair. So that is, I think, a cause of a lot of the anxiety, stress, and then what becomes a negative self-bias or a negative self-esteem or an improperly developed self-esteem, meaning your I am is based on something that is irrelevant, and it's not based on your I am and your value of a person, just that being sense, which is always with you. So to concede, to give in to this judgment of the narcissist is to oftentimes disempower yourself and say, you're right, you are the boss of me. And that oftentimes is very restraining for people to unknowingly become that in a relationship. In other words, it is not pulling out their best of them. The root word of education is educare, which means to bring out. So people then become educated to become a specific way based on some irrelevant judgment assessment, if that makes any sense, from this individual, when as you are right now is good enough. You are giving and you do deserve to receive and have the two-way respect and communication, and to let go of a lot of this need to constantly compare and judge and feel evaluated. This becomes very exhausting. So just stop, that constant evaluation, good, bad, this should be, this should not be. That thinking oftentimes will cause a lot of undue stress and a lot of undue psychic energy. When you could be serene, you could be content, you could be humble, you could be in an open and receptive state. You could then be seeing the big picture, seeing where you are connected to the whole, and how your experiences are becoming more and more meaningful on the day-to-day. Meaning, are you, utilizing this awareness, and are you growing in your behaviors, trying things new, new relationships? Here comes the hay fever. Excuse me. And so realize today to see what degree is tension sort of programmed into you, and to what degree do you want to deprogram a lot of that fear, that comparison, always being judged and evaluated. To what degree is that become part of the problem in your life and your lifestyle? And can you gradually give up and reduce that constant need to show up or feel that you have to, compare against another, and you feel like you're always trying to jump through hoops. This becomes very stressful, and stress is not a positive experience to be undergoing on a prolonged period of time. It will break people down, and they will then become sort of foggy in their thinking, which is always based on fear, obligation, and guilt. So it then perpetuates a negative self-assessment or negative self-bias, which then becomes very defeatist for the individual, meaning they just feel defeated. And they might even say, I dislike myself, I hate myself, I'm terrible, they might be making all these statements and really feeling upset. This is an erroneous and flawed thinking that has been taught, so put onto the individual, and not because they've be able to pull forth from themselves and to just be, and to be in that fullness, if that makes any sense, which is based on healthy boundaries and healthy standards. And so become more familiar and more friendly with yourself, and become more familiar with your boundaries and standards, so that you're not constantly inhibited and hindered by a negative self-assessment that was put there in order to oftentimes devalue and just sort of lack the validation that you need for as a social being. It's very important, and I hope that this discussion does help. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these discussions do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace be with you. Have a beautiful day.